In this tutorial, we're going to be exploring the theme of stamp printing. I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that use a couple of pieces of equipment that you should have accessible in the home already. And I'm going to show you how to apply ink or paint in a couple of different ways, and you can then use those skills and apply those techniques to create your own stamp print sample. What you'll need for this tutorial is some paper to print on, some paint that's quite thick in consistency, so acrylic paint is perfect for this, a paintbrush, a potato, some polystyrene, for example the pizza base in the packaging, and a pencil, and finally a cookie cutter. So this is the type of polystyrene you can use for printing. It's quite thin and you can buy it in packs and sheets like this. However, you don't need to. You can simply use the base from pizza packaging, for example, and that will work just as well. We're going to start with the potato first of all. I've sliced my potato in half so I've got a flat surface. And now I'm just using a cookie cutter just to push straight down into the potato. You don't need to have cooked this first. It should be soft enough and the cookie cutter will work well enough to cut straight into it. It doesn't matter what shape you use, but obviously the shape you do use is going to determine your design for your stamp. Now I'm just using a kitchen knife to cut around, so I'm cutting to the metal stamp inside. Just be careful of your fingers when you're doing this. It doesn't have to be particularly neat because the cookie cutter is going to maintain the shape of your stamp. And then you just remove the outside part of the potato. And you'll see I'm left with a nice star-shaped stamp. So like I say, acrylic paint is perfect for stamping because it's nice and thick. If you water it down or you use something like watercolour, for example, it's not going to work so effectively. It's probably just going to soak into the potato and not transfer to the paper so well. Make sure your shape is well covered in the paint before you stamp onto your paper. And you want to make sure that your paper is on a nice flat surface as well. Obviously, there may be a degree of trial and error when you're working out how much paint to put onto the potato to give you the best effect. And then after a couple of stamps, you'll need to reapply the paint again. You could try experimenting with creating different patterns with the stamp. We'll be exploring this in a little bit more detail in one of the later sessions. You may also want to think about what colour combinations you use. So for example, think back to the colour theory and apply your knowledge from that. So moving on to the polystyrene stamp now, I've just cut a small square away because I'm just creating a small motif or little logo. So I'm going to recreate the star so you can see a direct comparison. Obviously this is a little bit crudely drawn, but all you need for the polystyrene is a sharp pencil and you just jab it into the polystyrene to create a line, an indentation. And it's exactly the same principle in the fact that you apply thick paint to the polystyrene. Again, you might need to adjust how much paint you put on each time, and you'll need to top it up in between printing. But this time the paint is going to take all around the stamp apart from where I've drawn. So there'll be more colour from the stamp and the outline of the star is what won't print. You'll see what I mean as I start stamping. You want to be careful as well not to put too much paint onto the polystyrene so that it fills in the crevice. You want that gap to still be there. As you're printing, think about how a print would look on a roll of wallpaper, for example, or wrapping paper. It wouldn't just stop because that stamp had finished at that particular point. There will be, on my fourth star, for example, here, an overhang, so only half of the stamp will actually print. That way you can fill your whole page. If you've experimented with creating both stamps, it might be a nice idea to just do a combination print of the two. So in this sample, I'm going to use both my potato stamp and my polystyrene stamp, and I'm adding additional colours. So again, consider the colour theory and what you know about this. I've already used red on my palette, so it makes sense for me to carry on using a bit more red, but I'm also going to add in another warm colour. So in this instance, I'm going to be using yellow, but you could use oranges or browns, or go for contrasting colours, for example.